Welcome back. Joining me at the round table this morning is attorney and former Royal Oak Mayor Dennis Cowan, Detroit Free Press columnist Nancy Kaffer, pollster and analyst Steve Mitchell, and Focus Hope CEO Portia Roberson. Everybody, good to have you back.
Good morning.
What did we think of Congresswoman Haley Stevens this morning? Attack ads already out against Slotkin and Stevens. Does that seem extra early to anyone?
No, this is going to be a very expensive cycle. The Republicans were outspent in the last cycle, and they want to go after her. They look, I think, as the impeachment as an opportunity to do that, because she has not taken a stand on this. For the Democrats, for the last 3 years since Trump was elected, it was an impeachment looking for a crime, and so they think they've got one right now, and Republicans believe that this is an opportunity to take her out because this is such a polarizing
and nationwide, really.
Absolutely.
Doing this nationwide.
So, but part of what you said there sort of flattens some of the reality of what happened. Is you said certainly there are Democrats who have been talking about impeachment since after the election, before the man even took office. But then there's other Democrats like Representative Stevens and Representative Alyssa Slotkin who have been way more thoughtful and slower about this. And these ads really flattened all the nuance involved into, oh, these guys were just looking for an excuse. And that's sort of the unfortunate reality of political campaign ads, but it really doesn't do justice to the nuance of the conversation.
Let me go ahead.
Well, she's one of the congresswomen on the bubble. There's no question about it. She came in on a wave, and she could go out on a wave. I remember when the Republicans ill-advisedly went after Bill Clinton, and then afterwards got absolutely whacked in the next election and lost the House. So that is definitely something that is on the mind of Congresswoman Slotkin and all those others similarly situated that brought the Democrats into power in the House.
Yeah. Did you have a thought on that, Portia?
I mean, I guess I disagree a little bit. The Democrats have been looking for a way to impeach. I mean, I think Democrats, Nancy Pelosi in particular, tried to stay away from impeachment for as long as she could, even when other members of the party were demanding for an impeachment. And I think it was only until this recent, the recent statements of the president that she basically moved towards where we are now.
And in Washington, we've seen it started with subpoenas last week and moved up to White House refusals, more hearings, possibly more whistleblowers, arrests now. And it kind of leads to this overall question. Is it hard to not think America is just incredibly divided here? How bad are things when you look at the president's rally the other night, Nancy?
I mean, yeah, of course we're divided. We've known that since the 2016 election campaign started. But one of the things I think it's sometimes easy to forget if you did not live through Watergate, which is, of course, the biggest, more comparable, I think, than the Clinton situation. I'm 44, and I wasn't alive during that time. And in my mind, it's like, oh, there was this thing with this break-in at this hotel, and then the president got impeached, and then he left office. But it was years. It was years of this kind of divisive situation, and people saying this is going on too long, and it's bad, and there's nothing, and this is a witch hunt, and all this stuff. Which is even, when you've learned in history class that it was this long process, it's still kind of compressed when you think back on it. And I don't think this is. Things are bad, but we've kind of been here before.
Well, let me tell you, I worked on the Hill in 1973, the year before the president was removed from office, and it was not nearly as toxic as it is today. It wasn't nearly as toxic when Bill Clinton was impeached in 1998 either. This is a toxicity level unlike anything I've seen in American politics, and it is really scary. When people go after Ellen DeGeneres for talking to George W. Bush, I think it's absurd. I mean, the level of distrust and dislike is beyond the pale.
But that tone was set by our current president. That's the tone that he has set since the beginning of his presidency. We've always had parties that disagreed with one another on issues, on policy, on everything. And we've always still managed to not be in the sort of toxicity that we're in right now. And I think that the tone starts with the top. And from day one, whether it's been attacking people through Twitter or saying horrible things about people you don't like, The president has set that tone, and it continues to grow. And it's horrible for the whole country. I think we're in a place now that none of us are really familiar with.
But it's been unprecedented. Never in my lifetime have I seen a president attacked from the day before he even got inaugurated. And it's been constant and a constant drumbeat. I agree with Debbie Dingell. And the House has a chance to restore a modicum of faith in the process if they are transparent and thoughtful. Those are her words this week and her recommendation to Nancy Pelosi. And here's why. Right now, this entire hearing, alleged impeachment inquiry, because there has not been a vote as there was in the past, it has been conducted in secret. That is not going to lend the American people to have confidence in this process. And I think it's being done because the Democrats learned from the Mueller investigation they want to control the narrative, and they're going to try to do it as long as they can. But I think they'd be much wiser to have it as an open process, let both sides call witnesses, both sides have subpoena power, and until then, people are not going to have faith in this process.
The White House is refusing to cooperate with that, right?
Exactly, because it is not an impeachment inquiry. Nancy Pelosi had a press conference and made an announcement. There hasn't been one vote in the House, not even in the committee, to do anything yet. And this is really a pretense. And what really needs to happen is they need to bring this out into the open, stop interviewing witnesses in secret, do what they did in the Watergate hearings when, Steve, you'll remember, we had statesmen. We had Sam Ervin, Peter Rodino, people who were trying to do the right thing, and the chips fell where they may.
I was in the room when Alexander Butterfield said that there was a taping device in the White House. Happened to be there by accident that day, but I was there for the most significant day. So I'm very familiar with what was happening during the Watergate hearings. And I agree, it should be an open process. This has not been an open process, and no vote is taken. In all the speeches I gave in the 2018 cycle, and I give a lot of speeches to organizations, I said, one thing you can be assured of is that they will impeach President Trump sometime between now and the 2020 elections. And I think that prediction will be real. I think that the House will impeach on a partisan vote. The Senate will acquit and not remove him from office on a partisan vote.
Does everybody agree with that? I was going to wrap this with, where do you see this going? It was a horrible week for Rudy Giuliani. Is he going to be the fall guy in all this, or what do you see happening, Portia?
I mean, I definitely think there's a possibility. I mean, when you've got people who are associated with Rudy Giuliani trying to get on a one-way ticket out of the country last week and then getting arrested, I mean, I think they're trying to set up somebody to be the fall guy, so the president is not. I'd agree with Steve that I think it's going to play out just as he said, and it's unfortunate because I think that more people from the Republican Party need to step up and say, is this really our responsibility to do what we've been elected to do, or to just vote along party lines?
It's the only thing that will change that is if Mitch McConnell starts to get the sense that being connected to President Trump will hurt his caucus next year, then help him, and I don't see that
I wouldn't hold
happening.
my breath for that one.
Any Republican who votes for impeachment in the House or the Senate will never hold office again.
Last word.
I agree with Steve's analysis. The Senate will not convict, and as a result, President Trump will be elected in November of 2020.
All right. We're going to touch on what's happening in Lansing right after this. More at the Roundtable in a minute.